right, and we're on. Introducing Matt Polak, founder and CEO of Picnic Corp. How you doing, mate?
Good, Joe. Good to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to see you, man. I know we've sort of had this on the schedule for a while, but sort of life gets in its way. How you been?
Yeah, yeah, all is really well, just coming off a nice little spring break adventure and getting fired up for RSA, among other things. So it's that time of year. Feels
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's in the air.
I saw you was going to be at RSA. It looks like you've got a few events and stuff lined up. Are you doing something in partnership with another company, from what I saw?
Yeah, so we've got actually a nice sort of happy hour style event that we're doing with Joe Silva from Spection.
Hmm.
So Joe's a good friend. He was CSO at JLL
Hmm.
before, and he's come to the dark side and started a cyber. So he's doing cool stuff, and like I said, we're buddies and I think complimentary. So we're gonna have some fun and hopefully see some of our friends there too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not gonna lie, I got pretty hooked on the content that you put out with Rachel and Rob Lee the other week.
Uh,
Yeah,
that's
that was pretty impressive. Talk to me about
well,
that.
Yeah, it was super fun. So, Rachel's amazing. And, we've been friends for a while and just always trying to find things to do together that are fun. And so we were talking about who might we want to try to hack, in the way that she's so good at doing. That would be really interesting. We were brainstorming ideas. Mark Cuban was one that was thrown out, and we were kind of trying to like work through some of the timing around that. We had a list, and Rob Lee was like right at the top of the list next to Mark Cuban, which is cool for Rob for sure, right? To be sort of mentioned in the same breath. And yeah, he's also a friend, so reached out, and he was a super good sport about it, and said he was up for it. And yeah, the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll definitely put that link in the show notes because I was absolutely like laughing so loud with Rob's reaction to it, but also was very scared with how easy Rachel made it look to do his voice and deep fake. So yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. But anyway, we'll get into some fun stuff now then, Matt. So, with all my guests, I like to go back to where it all began and sort of how you first got in the industry, because I know you've got a bit of a unique background, let's say.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I've always been interested in intelligence as a topic. That was what I was into right after getting out of school. And but I'm also an entrepreneur, third generation entrepreneur, and so working in government wasn't really, I don't think, in my blood. So made the leap over to the private sector side. My first company was focused in competitive intelligence, and over time really morphed into a true competitive strategy firm, where we were doing really outside in type work. So really deeply understanding, what are competitors doing? What are suppliers doing? What do customers want? All these kinds of things that happen around a business. And through that work, I actually got exposed very deeply to the cyber world. So working with amazing companies like Cisco and VMware, RSA before, obviously before it went through the transition that it's been in now. And the closer that I got to the cyber world and the problems that are present in cyber, especially social engineering, which is the biggest attack vector that's unchecked today, the more I saw the similarities between what someone who would be doing human intelligence work needs and has access to, and how they operate, and how a social engineer does their work. So, kind of this process of collecting information is very similar between the two different disciplines, and so I deeply understood it from that point of view, and that's kind of how I got interested in it. And probably like a lot of founders, I just started talking to customers. I'd go and I'd say, hey Joe, are social engineering a problem for you? Are people a challenge for you in your business? And every CISO I talked to would say, oh man, it's like the biggest problem. And I'd say, oh, what are you doing about it? They say, oh, well, we give you training. And it's like, oh, does that work? It doesn't work, right? And I think everybody always sort of chuckle a little bit because, the training is good for a lot of things, but not for that thing in particular. And at least as we started to go through time, what we learned was that the thing that people really liked about what we did, the thing they most valued, was that initial ability of our platform to just go out and discover everything that's out there about Joe. So they could kind of have a holistic picture of what does your exposure look like, that reconnaissance phase, if we sort of use, cyber talk, MITRE talk. But not just the discovery, the remediation, right? So that's kind of where I think we've really built something unique and powerful. But that's sort of the arc of my story, sort of like
Mm.
government, brief stint in government work, and then transitioning into the private sector, and then getting very interested and involved in cyber through working with a lot of the big vendors.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what inspired it. The evolution of what's happened with you at Picnics, I see that sort of the idea has evolved over like the last few years that you've been running it. So what was the initial, like, was it just straight social engineering and then you've now pivoted slightly? How's it been?
Yeah, so we were very focused on social engineering in the beginning, and I think what's interesting about that problem is that it's both the biggest problem that's out there. If you look at all the different things that go into it, it's a huge problem, right? But it's also not super well understood by, by the market. So if you go ask five people what is social engineering, you're going to get five different answers, right? And so I think that there are some real challenges in trying to help people solve that problem because there's not a shared understanding of what the problem actually is. And so it was really, yeah, through that experience that we narrowed down our focus on the thing that really is super valuable to people that they love us for. And yeah, we've just been kind of doubling down behind that for some time now.
Yeah, nice. Can you talk to me about the report that you've just pushed out? Because I was looking at some of the data on that and I was just astounded, really.
Yeah, it's super interesting work. So, we, as I sort of alluded to, we have this ability to look at the footprint of, an organization or anyone based on open source data. And so we have, I think probably the richest and most compelling data set of corporate executives in the US in particular. So we looked at more than 10,000 C-suite executives in the US. Again, scanning only public data. Nobody gave us any of their information to do this. It's literally replicating what does a threat actor do, right? And we pushed, let's say Joe and Matt as examples through our system using that OSINT data, and the results that came back were pretty surprising, even to me, right? So thinking about some of the things that hit home for me when I just think about the results. It's like almost every single, like no one's escaping this problem is the answer,
Mhm.
right? It's like, basically 100% of people are pretty close to it, have exposure on data brokers, have exposure on the dark web. Certain industries, like I was shocked actually that healthcare had the most exposure for senior executives when it comes to home address exposure, things like that. So yeah, it's just really interesting. Of course, it's always really interesting to see your own footprint, right? That's what people get excited about. Like, oh, I want to see what do I look like, right? But then when you compare that against what does the macro data set look like, and so you can understand from a benchmarking point of view, how do I compare? What is my footprint? Like, yeah, I get that my footprint looks like, like this, but is that how everybody's looks? Like, what is it? So yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
If you had said to me, like, as a percentage, how much do you expect, as a percentage, would addresses be exposed? I probably would have sort of thought maybe half, but looking at your report, it was 93% of C-suite executives have had their home addresses exposed, which I just found was incredible. And then the other one was 94% had plain text passwords available.
Yeah, I mean that's I think a really surprising thing for a lot of people, and I think look, all everybody who works in cyber sort of knows what is a clear text password, but if you're
Mm,
not working in cyber and you're listening to us talk about this, basically it means it's human readable, right? It's not encrypted, it's not disguised in any way. If your fuzzy kitty password is exposed, like somebody can read that and try to use it, and so it's man, is that interesting, right?
mm,
4.3 on average. And of course, there's wide variance, right? We've come across people that have, many more than that. But
yeah.
that's the average.
Always talk about what you can do with Picnic. Like, what could the person that's now listening to this do? Because they're probably thinking, "Oh, damn." Initially, is there anything that they can sort of do off the bat?
Yeah, well, so I would say, for anyone who's a customer of ours who might want to be a customer, the cool thing is you don't have to do anything. We just go and solve the problem for you. So
Mm,
we run it as a fully, managed turnkey capability for folks. So, but setting that aside, I think, if you're listening to this and you don't have something like Picnic, I would say, just start by Googling yourself, put in your name, put in your home address, see what pops up. If you see some of these people search sites, like Spokio would be a kind of a common example that a lot of people have heard of before. Each of these sites supports a different opt-out method, and
mm,
you can go and you can start to work through the process of opting yourself out. it's painful. It takes a lot of time. They repost the data. It's not a perfect, it's not a perfect thing to do on your own. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try if it's something that you care about. So I would really caution people to be careful about signing up for the consumer services that are out there. Not all of them are bad or anything like that. It's not that. It's just that some of them do use offshore labor or are based in countries that might have questionable reputations. And so just be really careful and thoughtful if you're going to sign up for one of those consumer services about checking, where's the company located. If you're a LinkedIn user, poke around on LinkedIn, look at where the people are that are associated with the business, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So how does Picnic work? Tell us more about Picnic and what you are up to.
Yeah, so look, we focused in and narrowed in on this idea of we call it privacy as a managed service for the enterprise, and what that effectively means is the enterprise is our customer. So we work with a CSO, a CISO, a chief risk officer, general counsel. Sometimes depends on how an organization is structured, and we take in very basic information. Joe, give me your name, give me your corporate email. That's all we need. And then our technology platform goes out and discovers everything else that's out there about you. So you as the end user you don't have to do anything, that's what's amazing about it. And so we just go out and action this data. We get rid of the data. We really excellent and regular reporting that's automated out to folks too. So it's a super powerful capability.
Yeah, nice. Are you finding that like buyers are wanting it from a reactive, or is this like a proactive perspective, or is it a bit of both?
I'd say it is people that are thinking about doing this are proactively minded, I would
Mm,
say. But sometimes they are proactively minded because they've been forced to react. So it's a bit of a mix there, I'd say. But we are seeing more and more interest in, I'd say, just pure proactive thinking. There's a lot. Geez, the tragic murder of Brian Thompson, I think, really propelled this particular issue of exposure to the front of people's minds back in December when it happened. And so, yeah, I mean, a tragic
mm,
event, but something that I think opened people's eyes to what is the connectivity? What is, could I use your mobile number to track your real-time location? Yeah,
yeah.
maybe I could, right? If I can find that number. So some of those things are, I think, very prevalent in the minds of our security leaders and teams that protect us every day.
Mm. What other like real life examples have you got?
Yeah, well, so there's of course like a very famous one that's in the same vein of the United Healthcare shooting, which is now is called Daniel's Law, where I don't know if you know the story or not, but there was
Uh,
a tragic case, I believe it was in 2021, where in New Jersey, a judge who was overseeing a range of trials, of course, had someone who was in her court who wasn't happy with the way things were going. That person searched her home address up online, showed up at her house, ended up shooting and killing
wow.
her, shooting and mortally wounding her husband. And she, as a result, she went forward and actually got Daniel's Law passed, which, at least in the state of New Jersey, allows for folks in the judiciary to be able to remove this kind of data from the web. So, that's a really unfortunate one, obviously, as well, but sort of just another reminder of how this data can be weaponized. I think maybe in a less uh, let's say kinetic way. We do see a lot, unfortunately, of harassment as well, of
Mm,
family, especially minor children. We're seeing this more and more where threat actors will become frustrated when a company doesn't want to pay a ransom because that's what the company is being told to do. And what they start to do is they start to go after the family of the executive. So they're starting to go after, we've got companies that we've been working with where, I mean, it's really unfortunate where the threat actors are calling the schools where the children are in school, threatening
wow.
administrators, threatening staff, that kind of stuff. And, it's the ability to do that. The thing that's important to remember is that the ability for them to do that is based on being able to figure out where you live, what's your phone number, what's the closest school, all these kinds of things are just part and parcel of how that kind of a thing unfolds.
Mm. I know the availability of data is obviously like becoming more and more abundant, but how is generative AI potentially like exacerbating this threat or issue?
Yeah, I'd say there's a bunch of ways that it's playing. So if you take the most basic version of this, I'd say, you know, a threat actor who maybe is not English speaking, can use it to write a more compelling email, a more compelling text message, that doesn't have a bunch of spelling mistakes, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be sort of an example. And you could probably imagine all the ways that you could say, oh, geez, I really want to invite my friend Joe to this event, write a really compelling email that would, based on all this information, right?
Wow.
So that kind of a thing. And then, some of the more emerging sides of AI that are using MCP and some of those types of technologies that actually go out and reach out to the web uh, do enable threat actors to superpower their own OSINT research. And so, while it might have taken a bad guy or bad gal maybe 6 or 8 hours to go and manually hunt Joe up online, they can now do that with a single prompt pretty quickly. And so, yeah. And of course, you can imagine folding together, the ability to search for the information with the ability to write something more compelling. And you've got kind of social engineering as a service, which we see happening as well, unfortunately, in the dark web as far as things you can purchase.
Okay, Matt. So you've slightly scared me throughout this this interview so far. Um, what other trends are you seeing? Like, is there anything else that you found like interesting or any other trends?
Yeah. So I think probably an interesting one. There's definitely this increase and I think we're seeing this across industries where it's somewhat a function of where we are macroeconomically, somewhat a function of where we are politically as a country. We're seeing, I think, more and more, I'll say, unhappiness, kind of class-based warfare. People talk about it that way sometimes, where folks are getting, unfortunately, violent. They're getting, frustrated. And there's, a multitude of examples of cases where, just like the United Healthcare thing, where folks have, attacked someone in leadership inside of a company, and not even a big publicly traded company, private companies too. So I think that and I've been a party to some briefings from law enforcement and so on, where they believe that we're likely to see an increased trend toward this sort of behavior, unfortunately. So I think that is an important trend for security leaders and executives just to be aware of. Just because you work in a 100-person company or a 500-person company and you're in leadership, it doesn't necessarily mean that that you might not be on the receiving end of something you don't want to be on. So
Yeah,
uh, yeah,
for
so I
sure.
think an unfortunate trend. And look, some of the things that that have always been out there, we see happening lots and lots more. The old good old CEO gift card scam, I think that comes up in just about every
Classic.
conversation I have, right? And so yeah, so the oldies are still the goodies, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So let's go into Picnic a bit deeper. How exactly will you be able to help somebody that is potentially interested in purchasing Picnic?
Yeah, so for us, I'd say a very common starting point is an executive team, a board of directors, key employees in the business that want to that want to vanish from the internet, basically, right? They want the right stuff to be out there. They want to be able to have a public persona that's associated with their business, but they don't want someone to know where they live or where their kids go to school or these kinds of things. And so working with us is really easy.
Mm,
Essentially, I mentioned this earlier, but essentially just first name, last name, work email. That's all we need to start protection for someone. And then there's nothing that the protectee needs to do. We run a holistic program that goes out and does the work for them. And then, if there's something that they need to do, for example, we're not going to hack Joe's Facebook profile, for example, if you even have Facebook. But if we find something that, of course, I'd be surprised if
we
we
work
did.
in security.
There you go. Yeah. But for someone who might have it, right, we're not going to hack their
Yeah.
Facebook account, fix their privacy settings. We're going to say, hey, take 2 seconds and go and fix this one thing, right? Trying
Okay.
to be very, very narrow about it.
Is-
So that's sort of how we work with individuals. And we have some tooling on the enterprise side too, which is fairly interesting. Integrations into more traditional security infrastructure that would allow the organization to do things like, for example, block exposed passwords. So, if you imagine that we take in your work email, well, we can actually connect it to your personal email, connect it to your former work emails, connect it to your mobile numbers, all these things. And then we can find all the passwords associated with all those different identities that you have out there. And so that enables us then to help the enterprise protect itself from, yeah, the baggage that you might bring to the business from the dark web. Again, no fault of your own. It's just a function of living in the digital world that we're in today that everyone I think what was the stat? 94%, right? 94% of us, pretty much everybody who's going to come work in a business got some clear text credentials out there. So,
Yeah.
and, yeah, and companies say, well, we have passwordless to protect against this, and that's good. Passwordless is great, but there are almost always systems that still require a password, or that still require personal email as a backup, or a personal mobile number as a backup, right? So, threat actors know how these systems are stitched together, and there's no, unfortunately, as we all know, there's no silver bullets in security. So I
Yeah.
think about this is like a layer, right? This is a layer that's about that exposure that's out there in the public web, in the dark web.
Yeah, I think it's important as well because when you hear about data sets and people throwing out like 94% and things like that, when I saw it was 10,000 executives, I thought, okay, nice sample size. But then I was even more surprised that it was like 400 of the top Fortune 500. And I was like, wow, okay, so this is the. So just for anyone that's thinking about these numbers, like we'll share the report in the show notes as well for people to be able to review. But yeah, not nicely done. Matt, this is great. What's the plans? What's the future? I know the short term we've got RSA coming up, but where are you taking picnic and what's on the future for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're just continuing to double down behind what people really love. Getting more data faster, better, more remediations. Expanding beyond the scope of what we do today from a data discovery and removal point of view. So that's, I'd say, a big focus for us. And then, of course, helping the security teams, our customers, the security team, not the end user. We're not a consumer product. So helping them to be able to leverage that human risk intelligence that we have beyond just what we do from a removal point of view. So things that connect into enterprise telemetry, things like that would be valuable to a SOC, for example. Those I think are interesting and important things to be thinking about.
Brilliant. Matt, I wish you all the best of success for the future, my man, and I look forward to meeting you at RSA.
Awesome, Joe. Look forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much.
You're the man.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed today's show, please like and share with your friends and colleagues, as this is really important for the show's reach. If you'd like to be our next guest or are interested in Aspiron Search's staffing solutions, please get in touch directly with me or reach out to us via our website www.aspironsearch.com.